9 days after the last match that we played, we take to the London Stadium to face Newcastle United in the Premier League. West Ham need to pick up some points, and they need to pick them up pretty damn sharpish. But Newcastle United, it has to be said, I think they looked quite impressive in their last outing against Tottenham Hotspur in the Carabao Cup in midweek. But the thing that probably gives me a little bit of hope is the fact that when you look at their league form so far, they played 9 games, same as us, and it's won 3, drew 3, lost 3. That's probably the thing that makes me sort of have a little bit of hope. And that's always the thing as a West Ham fan that's very, very dangerous, because it's the hope that sucks you in. It's the hope that things are going to improve. Improvements are just around the corner. And I got to tell you, it's a damn long corner, if there is a corner that we're going to turn at any point this season. But if we are going to turn a corner and if we are going to move up the table, it needs to happen pretty damn soon. But we'll get into all sorts of things. Now, guys, I want you to get involved. There's a comment section below, so please get stuck in with your thoughts on the various topics that we're going to cover along the way. I've also discovered a little thing, and I don't know whether this is going to be of any help to any of you people watching, but there's a QR code that's just turned up in the top corner there. Now, if you are already subscribed to the channel, then thank you very much indeed for your support. But if you're not, if you wouldn't mind scanning that QR code that's over my right shoulder, then that would very much be appreciated. It will take you to, so I understand, it takes you to our YouTube page, and you can then click subscribe. It doesn't cost you any money, takes a second of your time. We don't get any data sensitive information. It just helps to grow the channel into something bigger than it is right now. And if you could drop a like and or hype onto this particular production, then we would very much appreciate your support. Thank you very much indeed. So that's the advertising bit out of the way. So Newcastle United, as I say, they've had a little bit of an up and down bits and pieces start to the Premier League. I'm just going to add this to the production, and I'm going to press a button, which will then mean that will then wind on my usual little presentation. There's a few little bits and pieces that are missing. I've had a little bit of a technical glitch, which means certain slides that I would normally have aren't going to work for this, but it is what it is. We'll just have to get on with it. But those of you that have seen these productions before will know roughly what is going to come up. And those of you that haven't, I hope you enjoy the show. So, yeah, so my thoughts on Newcastle United. Look, they've got a top manager. They're obviously backed by the Saudi Arabian money, which is something that there is to their advantage. You look at some of the players that they've brought in, and since the PIF came in, players that they've used to build from the bottom up, and they've revolutionized the club, because I think it's fair to say that under the previous ownership of Mike Ashley, I think a lot of people look at Mike Ashley and, truth be told, probably would make a parallel between him and West Ham's current majority shareholder, a certain Mr. David Sullivan. But they've improved, they've gone out, they've used their financial firepower to the best of their ability to bring in players that were a class above what they had before, and they've built, and they've managed to last season, good luck to them, managed to get the League Cup in the trophy cabinet. And their first trophy? Certainly, it was their first domestic trophy in 70 years, if I remember correctly, which absolutely amazing for them. And Newcastle United are a huge club. It's a vibrant city, and it's got one club in it. London's obviously got many different clubs within it. Manchester have got a good few clubs within it. Newcastle only has the one club operating in a professional capacity at the very least. So they've got a lot of fervent support, and the fact that they managed to bring home the League Cup, like I say, good luck to them. I've got no problem with that. And if you look at the record between the two teams in previous meetings in the Premier League, as you can see there, Newcastle do hold an advantage, 25 wins to 15 in their favour, with 14 matches drawn in Premier League history. So I think that there's a lot of things that probably say that they're going to be favourites, and you then factor in our form and all the rest of it, and you just go, yeah, I would probably suggest that we're going to be going into this match with a bit of maybe not a mountain to climb, because, as I say, when you look at their form in the Premier League, and like I say, this is what's giving me hope, is the fact that of their last 9 matches in the Premier League, it's won 3, drew 3, lost 3. but are they just coming into a little bit of form at the right time? Now, one of the things that I looked at and was quite impressed about, and it was a player that I was aware of before he pitched up at St James's Park, is Nick Woltemade. Now, he's basically the guy that has effectively replaced Alexander Isak. And to be honest with you, I don't think that it looks like they've really skipped a beat. I don't think he's, what I can see, he's certainly not a downgrade on the Alexander Isak that's turned up at Anfield. Let's put it like that. Woltemade is going to be an absolute handful. It'd be interesting to see what the back line is that Nuno puts out. But Newcastle, as I say, as a club, huge club. I've got a great deal of respect for them. This particular incarnation of them, I think if they can get it right, and I think under Eddie Howe, as I say, I think he's a fantastic manager. I think they could be a force to be reckoned with. I think that if they get it right, they're going to be pushing for top 6, top 5 easily, maybe even a Champions League position. But we'll wait and see on that. But at the minute, as I say, the thing that gives me a little bit of hope is that they've not exactly got an unblemished record in the Premier League so far this season. Now let's have a look at some news coming in from Newcastle in terms of injuries. So at the moment, according to my information, and I'm recording this on Friday afternoon, so by the time this goes out, there may have been players that might have been made a miraculous recovery. That's just the nature of the beast. But as right now is concerned, and on the information that I've got available to me, there are 4 players that are going to be missing from the Newcastle United squad. One of them is a former West Ham player in Harrison Ashby, who a lot of people might even be turning around and saying, who? Was he? Yes, he was. But he went to Newcastle. It's not really worked out for him terribly well there either. It is what it is. The other 3 players are out: Lewis Hall, Johan Wissa, and Tino Livramento. As far as we're concerned, and Nuno gave his pre-match press conference a little bit earlier on, and I did watch it, and he's confirmed that Mavropanos is going to be out for a couple more weeks. He's apparently back on the grass, if you will, using that often used phrase that Premier League managers use. He's on the grass. I don't think he's referring to him being on any of the old substances. I think he's talking about as far as the surface as he's underneath his feet is concerned. But, it's not for me to judge if it's not particularly as I read it to be. But Mavropanos is on the way back. Isn't it a damning indictment that Mavropanos, we're actually praying that he comes back sooner rather than later? With all due respect, that's probably a bit of a damning indictment, but we'll just have to go on with £75 million worth of centre-back, I guess. Or maybe, given a lot of the alterations that Nuno has done in the previous 2 matches, is he going to play a little bit of a curveball? And there was a comment right at the end of the press conference that caught my attention, because the last question was asking about academy players, and he seemed very keen to involve them and say that we needed them. And the good thing is that there's been a lot of academy players that in this previous couple of days since the Leeds United defeat at Ellen Road, there have been a lot of players from the academy that have extended their current deals, 2 examples of which being Josh Landers and Mohamedou Kante. So good news. So in the 9 days or even less than that, there's been some academy players that have put pen to paper and committed to a deal. Now, a cynic could turn around and say that that's possibly safeguarding against next season, that if we go down, that these are going to be players that we're going to possibly utilise a little bit more than possibly we would do if we was a Premier League club. But that's quite a cynical attitude, and it's not one that I'm going to subscribe to. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But anyway, it's good news. And as I say, he made that point that we're going to need to utilise some of the academy players, at least until January, I would suggest. And beyond that, who knows? Anyway, so let's get into back to the West Ham injury news. So Mavropanos is out, Fullkrug is out, Scarles is out, but one player that does return, and again, this links into the academy theme that I was just talking about. George Earthy has made his comeback from injury sooner than expected, which is really great news. And he actually played in a midweek game for the 21s against Swindon Town at Swindon's ground. The county ground, if I remember correctly. Is it a county ground? Anyway, Swindon's ground, whatever. So I think he played the first half and then came off at half time, if I remember correctly. Now, that's, again, great news for George Earthy, great news for the squad that we've got an extra player that's come back sooner than expected that we can utilise if needs be. It beefs up the options that Nuno's has got to choose from. So, another player that's come back, that's always good news. So there's obviously a lot of players that we've got there to utilise. Are they of the necessary quality? That's probably a different matter. But that's just some of the team news. Now, just getting back onto who is the opposition key player. I think I've already mentioned him personally. I think Nick Woltemade, I think, is a player that we're going to do well to keep a sort of like a sort of under wraps, if you will, especially given the players that he's possibly going to be up against. I mean, look, is it going to be Kilman and Todibo? Is there a possibility that Igor could come into contention? Is there a possibility even that Kale Casey might start? That I do doubt, but I wouldn't be totally against it. Because to be perfectly honest with you, I don't really think that either Kilman or Todibo could point to any of their performances this season, if they are left out for Kale and Casey, and point to their performances this season with any sort of credibility and say, how dare you drop me to the manager? I think that they ought to hang their heads in shame, quite frankly. But yeah, Woltemade, I think Anthony Gordon is a player that we would need to keep a shackle on their left wing. So whoever plays as our right fullback, whether that is Aaron Wan-Bissaka or whether that is Kyle Walker-Peters or any other, because again, with Nuno, I'm not quite sure that possibly we can second guess what he's going to do given his last two lineups. But whoever it is, he's going to have to be on top form. As you can see there, though, I've actually earmarked the battle that's going to be on the other side of the pitch between El Hadji Malik Diouf and Anthony Elanga, who are the two people that I expect are going to be coming into direct collision as far as the match at London Stadium on Sunday afternoon is concerned. Anyway, so which West Ham player is going to be the key to a positive result? Now, it's obvious. It has to be Jarrod Bowen, and it's probably Jarrod Bowen pretty much every week at the minute. There was a period where I would probably argue Lucas Paqueta was, especially at the beginning of the season, those first 3-4 games where he's getting goals and whatever. But he seems to have dropped off, interestingly, since the transfer window shut. I don't know if those two things are linked, but those two things are factually accurate, I believe. But I think that we need Jarrod Bowen to be on top form for us to get anything. Again, in this press conference that I've just listened to, the question was, it was pointed out to Nuno that Jarrod has been involved either in scoring or assisting. I think it was about 58% of our goals. I don't know if she said this season or whatever. I mean, you can go back and look at it, but basically it was a high percentage of our goals and assists in a given period of time were involving Jarrod Bowen. And she made a comment, which when I heard it, I thought, oh, please, no, where she turned around and made the point about, well, what if he's out injured for any period of time, which obviously would not be good news for us. But he is our key player, and you look at other players and a lot of the other players, and like I say, I've mentioned Kilman, Todibo, and just shake my head. £75 million. You've got Tomas Soucek, great player down the years, has scored us many important goals. Obviously, was one of the team in Prague. And whatever you want to say about Tomas Soucek is he gives his all. I do have to question, though, if what he's got to give right now is enough as a central midfielder. I'm not quite sure he's got the legs as things stand at the moment. That's my opinion. I actually, and I'll probably sort of touch on this in due course. I actually think that if there's a position that he's going to be utilised in, if he starts, it's not as a central midfielder. I've got no problem with him coming on last 10 minutes of a game where we need to get an equaliser or a winner. I think that his ability to get into the box in the correct situations and nick a goal is something that we can't turn our noses up. But as I've always said, he's not Kevin De Bruyne. He's not an expansive, spraying the ball around type of central midfield player. That's not his game. But one thing you will absolutely guarantee is that Tomas Soucek will give you everything he's got to give. But whether what he's got to give anymore, whether he's still got enough gas in the tank, so to speak, that is really the question for me. Anyway, I'm going to get my starting 11 out there, and I'd like you guys to get involved as well and get your starting 11s in, and we'll get stuck into it. So, goalkeeper, I think Areola, it's probably a given that he's going to start. There's obviously been an interesting little development that happened during the week, that the loan of Finley Herrick to Boreham Wood was, again, same as Caelan Casey, cut short. Now, you have to ask yourself the question, why? Because his loan was actually going really well, to the extent that he's got 10 games, 7 clean sheets, and I think he conceded 5 goals or something like that. So with Finley Herrick coming back, does that mean that the time of Mads Hermansson is coming to an end before it's even really started? That's quite an incredible turn of events. But there must be a reason why Finley's been brought back into the fold early. There has to be a reason behind it. And I'd be very interested to know what that reasoning is. But anyway, I would probably say that it's not going to be Finley Herrick that's going between the sticks. I'd be incredibly surprised. So I would say Areola, but I wouldn't be averse to chucking Lucas Fabianski in if that's what Nuno decided to do, because he wanted to change things up and see what Lucas had to offer. I wouldn't be dead set against it myself. But anyway, so I would go with Areola. Now, the interesting thing for me as well is that Nuno has traditionally been a manager. When I observed him at Nottingham Forest, at Tottenham, and at Wolverhampton Wanderers, he usually tended to play with 3 centre-backs. Now, so far, he's resisted that particular urge. Could it be that this is the game where maybe he decides to go back to the tried and tested, as far as he's concerned, method of playing 3 centre-backs? I hope not, and I think probably what's going to stop him ultimately is going to be really a lack of options, more than anything else. It'd be interesting to see what happens when Mavropanos comes back. Does Mavropanos come back and slot in alongside Kilman and Todibo? That remains to be seen. But I think for me, if I'm picking this, and remember, this is my 11 and you guys can put in your 11, not the 11 you think that Nuno will pick, but the 11 that you would pick if you was in charge instead of Nuno. That's what we're after, and that's what I'm going to give you now. So I think with me, I think I would probably be inclined, and I know I've put him here in this particular battle because I do think that El Hadji Malik Diouf will start. However, if it was my 11, I would drop him out because I don't think this guy can defend for toffee. I think he looks great going forwards, don't get me wrong. But as far as defending is concerned, that's not his strong suit, which, given that he's a defender, is probably something of a concern. Now, I know people will probably turn around and say, well, really, he's a left wing back. So essentially what we've got then is Arthur Masuaku in disguise, because Arthur Masuaku was a similar sort of player. He was a left wing back who we played at left back, and he had readily admitted he was not a left back. He was a left wing back. He owned up to that. But we utilised him as a left back. And to be honest, he was never the best at defending. Going forwards, he looked okay. I think that Malik Diouf is a level above Masuaku in that aspect. So maybe that comment is probably a little bit unfair on me, but I'm just making the point that Masuaku was a player that looked okay going forwards, not so good coming back the other way. And I think that Malik Diouf is probably similar in that regard. Anyway, but I would drop out Malik Diouf and I would put in Kyle Walker-Peters at left back. My right back would be Aaron Wan-Bissaka. My centre backs. Now, this is probably going to cause a little bit of consternation, a little bit of a conversation, but I would drop out the pair of centre backs that I've mentioned earlier in Kilman and Todibo. They haven't done enough. They haven't done enough. Now, what I'm going to suggest may well come back and bite me on the arse. But one of the centre backs I would deploy, I actually mentioned earlier and probably gave you guys a bit of a clue, that one of the centre backs I'd be inclined to deploy would be Tomas Soucek. I don't think he's got the legs to play central midfield anymore, but I do wonder whether he's possibly able to play as a centre half. I know he's played there in the past, and I wonder what he might have to offer. And there is really only one way we are going to find out. Can he be as bad as Kilman and Todibo? I very much doubt. And there's only one way we're going to find out ultimately. So I would probably play him in. And also that probably feeds into the next guy, because this next guy, I don't know whether he's any good or not, to be quite honest. And all I've got is what other people have said, that he's no good, he's this, he's that. But I remember people saying that about Craig Dawson. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll the dice and I'm going to play Igor. I'm going to play a centre-back partnership of Igor and Soucek. Now, it might not work. It ultimately might not work. And do I think that Nuno's going to pick it and we're going to see it road tested? Probably not. But I don't really have the confidence in Kilman and Todibo to be able to say that this would be any worse. So why not? Now, I think I would like to play a 4-2-3-1. Previous games I've advocated a 4-3-3, but I think against Newcastle, I think I'd probably play with two defensive midfielders. And they would be Sengutu Magasa and Freddie Potts. For me, Freddie Potts has been chronically underused. When he's played on the pitch, which was, I'm looking at the second half against Everton, the second half against Leeds, we've got that ball moving forwards at a greater tempo, and he just looks so calm in there. Nothing seems to faze him. It doesn't bother him in the slightest. Whereas I think when he's not in there, I think we look quite panicked. We too many balls going sideways and backwards. Freddie Potts, you can see it when the ball comes to him. His first thought is to get that ball moving up the pitch. So I would place Sengutu Magasa alongside Freddie Potts as the double pivot, as they call it. Now you then got the three offensive midfielders, as it were. Well, on the right, it's probably no surprise, Jarrod Bowen, the captain, he has to go there, doesn't he? As I said, he's the key player, so he has to play there. Now, this is where I have a little bit of a conundrum at this point, because then the next four spaces are, I think, are completely open to debate. I do think that Matheus Fernandes hasn't looked a £40 million player. He doesn't set the price tag, and I know that, but he hasn't looked a £40 million player. So, but he did come on again in the second half, and he had the impact, though it was a token gesture of scoring the goal at Elland Road last Friday. So I think I'd probably be inclined to play him. Now, is he better as the attacking midfielder, or is he better on the left? I'm really not sure. I don't know either way, if I'm being brutally honest, which one suits him better. I think I'm probably going to be inclined to say start him as the attacking midfielder central behind the striker. And then on the left, again, I've got a little bit of a conundrum here, because I'm not going to do what Nuno did and what Graham Potter did as well in, was it Chelsea or Tottenham, where he played Lucas Paqueta as a false nine? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. So I've got a little bit of a conundrum, because do I play Lucas Paqueta or do I play Crysencio Summerville? Now, both of them have their attributes, and both of them have things that I would consider to be deficient in their game. So I guess it's pays your money, takes your choice. I think I would be inclined for the ability to get at them directly and cause them a few problems. I think I probably would err on the side of Summerville, but it's a close thing. I don't think if I saw Paqueta out on the left, I don't think I'd be overly sort of frothing at the mouth as a result. The one thing I will say about Summerville is he is direct. He does get opposition fullbacks backpedaling, but I do think there are echoes of Said Benrahma about him, in that I think that there's quite an awful lot of times when he has a choice to make, and he makes that choice, and either it's the wrong choice or the execution isn't quite good enough. So yeah, the more I sort of think about it, the more I'm sort of thinking, do you know what? There is a case to say put Paqueta there, but I'm going to stick to my guns, and I'm going to say put Crysencio Summerville on the left. So, which means that, as I say, I'm not going to put Paqueta as the striker, so he's on the bench. So who's my striker? Well, I don't think you've got a choice. I think you've got to play Callum Wilson there. I think you could make a case possibly for Callum Marshall, perhaps. Could you even make a case for Josh Landers, who's done well in the under-18s, done well in the 21s? Doesn't seem to bother him that he's been moved up a level. He just carries on scoring. Maybe have him on the bench, possibly. And I think he would probably physically have more to offer than Callum Marshall would if he's deployed as a striker. But I think for the experience and possibly the fact that maybe Callum Wilson knows some of the weaknesses of the centre halves he's going to be coming up against, because obviously he was playing with them last season and previously. I think that possibly there may be some benefit in that. You're not going to get more than 60 minutes out of him, I dare say, but he's got 60 minutes to go out there at full tilt against his former club at the London Stadium and hopefully get a goal or an assist or make some sort of positive impact going forwards. So that would be my starting 11. You get your starting 11 in and we'll get stuck into that. We got to go with a score prediction. As I say, it's tough times at the minute. There's a lot of stuff that's going on at the club that's quite negative. Obviously, we've got the protest, we've got the sit-in that's going to be happening after the conclusion of the Newcastle game tomorrow. There's going to be the march that Hammers United are going to be trying to get 10,000 attendees, which I hope they do, for the Burnley game, which follows a week later. But there's, like I say, there's a lot of negativity, surrounding our results, surrounding all sorts of things that we've been getting up to. But do you know what? I'm going to try and find some sort of positivity from somewhere. And ultimately, for this 4-game sequence of Brentford, Leeds, Newcastle and Burnley, I turned around at the outset of that set of fixtures and I was asked a question, and it may not have been on here, it might have been on another podcast, where I was asked what was the points tally that I thought we could reasonably get. And I sort of thought about it and I said 4. Now, is that good enough? I would suggest it's not. But I think that still could be on. Because I think we could get a point here. And you're probably going to sort of spit your tea out as I say it. I know. It's the hope that kills you. But I'm gonna go for a 1-1 draw. And I'm pinning my hopes that Nuno isn't going to put out some sort of funky lineup that when we look at it and it unfolds and we're not going to look and go, what the hell is he doing? Now, when I say a funky lineup, and I appreciate that earlier I did offer Tomas Soucek as one of my starting centre halves and Igor alongside him. But like I say, I've explained my reasons, and I think that the two incumbents can't really say too much in terms of the quality that they've brought to the table. We'll wait and see what unfolds. But I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw, and you won't be surprised that my goal scorer is that gentleman that's on the screen there, Jarrod Bowen. But you get your thoughts in on this particular topic, and we'll get stuck into that. And thank you very much indeed for watching, guys. And if you've made it this far, if I could just draw your attention to that QR code over there, over my right shoulder. If you are not subscribed to the channel, if you scan that QR code, you will then be taken to our YouTube page, and you can then click subscribe to become a member of the West Ham Massive family. It doesn't cost you any money, takes a second of your time. We don't get any data sensitive information. It literally just helps to grow this channel into something bigger and better than you currently find it, really. So if you could also put a like and give us a hype, that would also be amazing. And we'll catch you next time. Please feel free to click either of the 2 videos that you can see on the screen. There is also a little button in the middle of the screen that if you click that, you can also subscribe to the channel as well. Thanks for watching. Come on, you Irons.